In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is
My sister poisoned my food when she was pregnant, and her messages confessing everything shocked the police. I need to share this very complicated situation I am experiencing with my family in order to get outside opinions. I am a 26-year-old woman, happily married to Caleb, 27. After several attempts, I finally got pregnant about 2 months ago. The news filled us with joy and nerves, but the reaction of my family was completely unexpected. My younger sister Ella, 22, has always been the favorite of our parents, Henry and Doris, both 56. During our childhood, our relationship was quite difficult. At first it wasn't so obvious, but as we grew older, the different treatment we received from our parents became more noticeable. She always stood out at any family gathering. She was sociable, self-confident, and had a natural charm. It didn't matter if it was because of her academic achievements, her personality, or her ability to make everyone laugh. She was always the center of attention. Everything seemed to come easily to her. She got excellent grades, had lots of friends, and everything seemed to come naturally to her. In contrast, I was quieter and more reserved. I found it difficult to fit in with groups, and my interests were different to those of others. Although my achievements were important to me, they never seemed to impress my parents as much as anything Ella did. They weren't directly mean to me, but it was impossible not to notice the difference in their support. While they celebrated Ella's every achievement, I felt like I needed to try twice as hard just to be noticed. This situation caused a lot of tension between us during our youth. Although we had some good times, there was always that feeling of competition. She never took me seriously, and I could tell that she considered my introverted personality strange. Over time, I began to distance myself from her, partly out of frustration and partly to avoid the constant comparisons. It wasn't the best relationship between sisters, but it was what we had. When we found out I was pregnant, I was really looking forward to sharing the news with my family. Although I knew it wasn't Ella who was breaking the news, I hoped they would be happy for us. I thought my parents would be delighted, but when I told them, their reactions were strange. My parents said the right things, but you could tell something was bothering them. Ella, for her part, showed little interest and only made indirect comments like, "Wow, that was quick," or "Well, okay." Her attitude was dismissive and it hurt, but I tried not to make a big deal of it. I wanted to focus on my joy about the baby. In the following weeks, the tension with Ella increased. Every time I mentioned something about the pregnancy, she would make sarcastic comments like, "So you're going to be one of those people, huh?" Or "That's what happens when you don't wait long enough to have children." It was obvious that it bothered her that I was the first to get pregnant. I guess she always assumed she would be the first to have children, which I can understand to a certain extent, but her attitude seemed childish to me. And the worst thing wasn't just her behavior, but how my parents allowed it. They ignored her hurtful comments as if they didn't matter. They clearly didn't care that she was hurting me. The situation came to a head last week when my parents invited Caleb and me to a family dinner. It was supposed to be casual and enjoyable, just a chance to catch up and enjoy each other's company. Nothing special, but that's when everything completely spiraled out of control. When we arrived, Ella made a big fuss about a special dish she had prepared for dinner. I don't want to sound malicious, but Ella has never been a good cook. I have seen her prepare meals that were raw or burnt, and more than once I have ended up with a stomach ache or food poisoning after tasting her food. When she presented her dish with such pride, I was skeptical, but I preferred not to say anything so as not to hurt her feelings. I thought I could try it and discreetly leave the table if I felt sick. He served me a portion and I started to eat. I immediately noticed a strange taste. It wasn't necessarily unpleasant, but something wasn't right. The food left a weird sensation on my palate, but I tried to ignore it to avoid creating tension and having my parents and Ella start an argument with me. Caleb noticed that I was hardly eating and asked me if I was feeling all right. I replied that I just felt a bit unwell. I thought it might be nerves or pregnancy hormones, but the more I ate, the worse I felt. I really tried to hang on, but halfway through the meal I started to feel dizzy. My stomach was churning and I felt nauseous. It was then that I realized that something was very wrong. I tried to discreetly put my plate away, but Ella stared at me and, with a disturbing laugh, said something that left me frozen. "I didn't think you'd really do it. You're lucky. You didn't end up with food poisoning or anything, but hey, you made it, didn't you?" I was speechless, completely shocked. Was this some kind of twisted joke? I couldn't believe it. I was 2 months pregnant and feeling terribly unwell. I could hardly stand up. I tried to convince myself that he was only joking, but there was nothing funny about it. It was just cruel. I had to get out of there immediately. Caleb noticed how pale I was and asked me if I was all right. He helped me get to the car and we drove quickly home. I was terrified. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew something wasn't right. Caleb took me straight to the hospital because the pain had become intense. After several tests, we discovered that I had ingested something in Ella's food that caused a reaction. The doctors acted quickly. Fortunately, my baby was fine, but they warned me that it could have been very dangerous. If we hadn't sought medical attention in time, the consequences could have been much worse. Caleb was furious when he understood the gravity of the situation. As soon as we got home and he made sure I was comfortable and safe, he called my parents. He didn't hold back at all. He told them straight out how angry he was about what had happened and how they had treated me. His voice trembled with rage as he demanded an explanation of how they could find funny a situation that had put me and our baby in danger. When they tried to minimize it by saying it was a harmless joke, he cut them off, making it clear that this went far beyond a bad joke and that their actions were cruel and irresponsible. He warned them that if they couldn't understand the seriousness of the matter, they would not be welcome around me or our son. Seeing Caleb defend us gave me great comfort. It was clear that he would not allow anyone, not even my family, to put us at risk or treat me with such negligence. The next day, I contacted my parents to talk about what had happened. Instead of showing concern, they seemed annoyed with me. My mother said something like, "You're fine now, aren't you? It's all over now, so what's the problem?" My father also played down the situation, saying I was exaggerating. I was stunned. I tried to explain to them the seriousness of the matter, but they insisted that Ella hadn't meant any harm. They thought I was overreacting. The situation worsened when Ella didn't even apologize. She just laughed and said I was being oversensitive. She even had the nerve to say that I was ruining their fun by making an issue of it. My parents continued to fail to support me, treating the incident as if it were unimportant. At that moment, I felt completely frustrated and hurt. My parents seemed more interested in defending Ella than in listening to how I felt. I couldn't believe they justified her behavior. It was as if they were blind to the seriousness of the situation. The following days brought more consequences. Several family members who were at the dinner began to contact me. Some expressed their concern and asked about my state of health. Meanwhile, others, including members of the extended family, began to distance themselves from my parents and Ella. They commented on how inappropriate it was to joke about something like this, especially when a pregnant woman was involved. The more opinions I received, the more it became clear that my parents were the only ones defending Ella and what happened. Now there is a real division in our family. My parents are very angry with me for ruining everything and making Ella look bad. They insist that I'm just trying to make her look like the villain. But honestly, the more I think about it, the harder it is for me to understand why they don't see the seriousness of this situation. I really don't want to create family conflict, but I can't just ignore what happened and pretend that nothing happened. How am I supposed to act like everything is fine when things could have ended tragically? I could have lost my baby. I feel lost on how to handle the relationship with my parents when they are willing to overlook this behavior. She hasn't even apologized, and I feel like my family is making me feel like I'm to blame for everything. That's why I need to know if I'm wrong to make an issue out of this or if I should just forget about it and move on like they want me to. Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since that terrible family dinner, and I need to share some news with you. A few days ago, my aunt contacted me to see how I was doing. She had heard about what had happened from other family members, who were all shocked by Ella's behavior. Among all the relatives, my aunt was one of the few who showed genuine concern for my emotional well-being. It was comforting to be able to talk to her, as she has always been on my side, and it felt good to have family support. At the end of our conversation, she mentioned something that took me by surprise. She suggested that I consider filing a police report against Ella. She said it in such a calm and sincere way that it left me thinking. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Going to the police seemed extreme. However, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. My aunt explained to me that Ella's actions were not just a prank gone wrong, but something potentially dangerous. She reminded me that I have every right to protect myself and my baby, especially if my parents refuse to hold Ella accountable for her actions. In that moment, I truly understood the gravity of what had happened and how close I had come to tragedy. Although I wasn't sure if I would file the report, I felt validated to hear that someone else recognized that my concerns were legitimate. After speaking to my aunt, I shared the idea with Caleb. He has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole situation. When I mentioned the possibility of filing a police report, he immediately supported me. He assured me that whatever my decision, he would stand by me. He told me that if I felt going to the police was necessary to protect me and our future child, he would fully back me. I felt more confident knowing that I didn't have to passively accept what had happened or allow my family to minimize my feelings. I could take action. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to do. However, it is a difficult decision. If I decide to go to the police, it would probably destroy any possibility of reconciliation with my family. Although I feel deeply disappointed by my parents and Ella, taking that step would be irreversible. I am still overcome with guilt, as if perhaps I am exaggerating as my parents insist. I can't help but wonder if I am being too dramatic or if filing a complaint would be excessive. But I also know that I cannot ignore something so serious, especially since it affected my health and could have endangered my baby. My parents are really angry with me, saying that I'm trying to ruin Ella's life and that I'm making too much of everything. They've even suggested that I'm holding a grudge and seeking revenge because she's the favorite, which is completely untrue. This has nothing to do with jealousy or competition. It's about my safety and that of my unborn baby. The more I think about it, the more frustrated I feel. I can't understand how my parents don't see the seriousness of the situation or how they can defend Ella's actions. It's as if they live in a parallel reality where everything she does is justified. On the other hand, Caleb has been in touch with other family members to get their opinions, and many agree with him. Some relatives have even decided to distance themselves from my parents and Ella because they don't want to be associated with people capable of doing something so dangerous. It's comforting to know that others recognize the seriousness of the situation, but it saddens me deeply that my own parents can't see it, and that hurts more than I can say. I find myself in a very complicated situation. Should I go ahead and file the police report to make everything official, even knowing that my relationship with my parents and my sister could be completely destroyed, or should I just ignore it like they want and pretend it never happened? It's something I struggle with every day. Part of me feels that I need to stand my ground and show that Ella's actions were unacceptable. But then there is that constant fear about how this could push me even further away from my family. Would filing a police report be too much? Am I overreacting? Or is it a justified step after everything that has happened? Update 2. 2 weeks have passed since that terrible family dinner, and the situation has become even more complex since my last update. I am really struggling with all this, and I need advice on what to do. First, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who took the time to comment on my original post. Your opinions and advice have helped me see things more clearly. I have been dealing with guilt and self-doubt, but reading all your perspectives has made me feel more confident and supported. It means a lot to me to know that so many of you took this seriously and validated my concerns. I have considered all your comments, and they have helped me make a decision that I feel is right for me and my baby. It is difficult to take such a stand against my family, but I now know that protecting myself and holding Ella accountable is the best thing I can do. I really appreciate each and every comment. Thank you for helping me find clarity in all of this. At first, I was completely shocked. The idea of pressing charges seemed extreme and, honestly, I hadn't even considered it until that moment. But my aunt pointed out that what Ella did wasn't just a silly joke or a mistake. It could have been really dangerous. She reminded me that my well-being and my baby's safety were at stake, and that I shouldn't feel pressured to minimize it just because it was family. However, it is a very difficult decision. I know that filing a complaint would mean a definitive break with my family, and my parents would probably never forgive me. They are already furious, calling me an exaggerator and accusing me of holding a grudge against Ella just because she is their favorite. My parents have tried to distort the whole situation by turning it into a jealousy issue, which is far from the truth. This has nothing to do with sibling rivalry or resentment. It's about my safety and that of my baby. Apparently, my parents found out that I was considering taking legal action. Instead of talking to me directly, they contacted Caleb hoping he would talk some sense into me. I guess they thought he would convince me to forget the whole thing, but Caleb didn't hold back. He made it clear to them how upset he was that he had allowed Ella to get away with it. He made it very clear that if they thought he was going to let this pass, they were very much mistaken. I wasn't there during the call, but from what he told me, he didn't hesitate to express how deeply disappointed he was in them for downplaying something so dangerous. Shortly after the call, I received a text message from Ella. It was the first time she had tried to explain herself since the incident. The message began with her saying that she didn't intend for it to go that far, but as I read on, her tone became darker. In fact, she admitted that she didn't want me to have a baby before her, something I already suspected. She said she felt she had the right to be the first to start a family and that seeing me pregnant was like a slap in the face. Her jealousy over something as natural and personal as pregnancy was truly disturbing. The message went on, and the more I read, the more it seemed like she was confessing that she had planned to poison me out of pure malice. She even insinuated that it wasn't just a joke or a prank gone wrong, but that she did it because she couldn't bear the thought of me becoming a mother before her. I felt awful. I didn't reply to her message, not because I didn't have much to say, but because I realized that replying would only make things worse. The only way to handle the situation was to ignore it. Ella's first apology seemed more like a weak excuse, and I thought that maybe she would finally understand the gravity of her actions. I held out hope that she would reflect on what she had done, but instead, my lack of response only made her angrier. The next day I received another message from her, much darker than the first. Her tone had completely changed. She wasn't even trying to defend her actions anymore. Instead, she began to blame me directly, calling me selfish for getting pregnant before her, claiming that I was stealing her moment and saying that I deserved what happened at dinner. She even made some terrible threats, warning that if I tried to ruin her life by talking to anyone or pressing charges, I would regret it. I was speechless. It was clear that she was desperate to protect herself, even if it meant trying to scare me into silence. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep this in the family. If Ella was capable of saying such cruel things to her own sister, knowing that she had already put my health at risk, I had to take action. Her words, the way she admitted her jealousy and tried to justify her actions, it was all documented. I knew I had to save these messages as evidence. After seeing that last message, I made a decision: I need to file a police report. I know it will cause a lot of conflict in my family, and I'm sure my parents will see it as an unforgivable betrayal, but I can't just keep quiet and pretend this didn't happen. It's not just about me, it's about protecting my baby and making sure Ella understands that there are consequences for her actions. This is not something I can ignore, especially after she reaffirmed her actions and threatened me. I am truly devastated by everything that has happened. My parents have practically taken Ella's side, ignoring the real danger she put me in, all to maintain a false peace. It is devastating to see them so oblivious to the gravity of the situation, choosing to back her instead of supporting me when I need them the most. Some family members have already distanced themselves from my parents and Ella, saying they cannot be around people who support this kind of behavior. It is comforting to know that others recognize how serious this is, but it only makes me feel more alone when it comes to my own immediate family. In the end, I have to do what is right for me and my child. Even if it means taking this drastic step, I know that by filing this complaint, my relationship with my parents and Ella will probably be irreparably damaged. But I can't just ignore the fact that my own sister endangered my health and the life of my baby out of jealousy. Her text messages, her threats, everything shows a level of malice that I can't ignore. I don't know if this is the right decision, but I feel like it's the only option left if I want to protect myself and hold her accountable. I'm really scared about what comes next. I don't want to hurt my family, but I can't keep acting like everything is fine. And considering that my family tried to ruin the family I'm building, I shouldn't be so worried about hurting their feelings. If standing up for myself means cutting ties with my family, then maybe that's something I just have to accept. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to share with everyone what has happened since then. Things have become even more complicated, but I have finally made a decision that I feel is the right one for me, Caleb, and our baby. As I mentioned in the previous update, I was planning to file a police report, and I did. After I filed it, the relationship with my parents worsened considerably. When they found out, they were furious. They didn't believe I would really do it, but once I showed them the evidence, the text messages, the threats, everything, they couldn't ignore the seriousness of Ella's actions. Instead of acknowledging it, they immediately tried to do damage control, trying to minimize the whole situation. They distorted everything, acting as if I was exaggerating or just trying to make trouble. They couldn't understand why I wasn't letting it go, why I was making such a big deal out of it. My father, especially, insisted that it was just a family matter and that I shouldn't let it ruin my relationship with Ella. He kept saying things like families fight and then they make up, treating it as if it were just a small argument that could be resolved with a conversation. But I couldn't understand how they couldn't see that this wasn't just a disagreement. It was a serious threat. I could have lost my baby, I could have died. My mother, meanwhile, was even more upset. She was desperate to make me feel guilty for not handling this within the family. She claimed that by going to the police, I was destroying the family and breaking their hearts. It was very difficult to hear this. She seemed more concerned about her feelings than about what had actually happened. There were tears and many attempts to make me feel guilty. She made it clear that she thought I was being childish and that I was destroying our family over a misunderstanding. It was as if she couldn't see that what Ella did was much more than just a simple mistake. In any case, I didn't pay any attention to her arguments. Of course, things got even more complicated after that. My parents were furious. They called me in every possible way and accused me of destroying the family. They insisted that I was causing unnecessary problems and that I should forget about everything. They tried to manipulate me with guilt, but I knew that this wasn't about them. It was about what was best for me and my baby. My parents, along with Ella, kept trying to defend their actions and minimize what had happened. They kept insisting that it was just a mistake, but I knew the truth. It was dangerous, intentional, and premeditated. After all this, I also decided to apply for a restraining order against Ella. I couldn't allow her to come near me or my baby. I was tired of the manipulation, the threats, and the toxic environment she had created. Ella was out of my life forever, and this was the necessary step to make sure that it stayed that way. The restraining order was granted, and I feel as if an enormous weight has been lifted from my shoulders. As for my parents, they have not taken the news well. They continue to side with Ella, refusing to see the gravity of the situation. It's heartbreaking, but there's nothing more I can do. They have made their decision and I have made mine. I have distanced myself from them for now, and I'm not sure what the future will bring, but I know I made the right decision. My priority is my safety and that of my child, and I will not apologize for that. In the end, I feel like I did what I needed to do. I have taken a stand for myself and for my baby, and I will not let anyone make me feel like I'm wrong for it. She will no longer be a part of my life, and I have done everything I can to make sure she stays away. I am looking to the future and focusing on my health, my baby, and building the family I want without Ella's toxicity or my parents. Thanks again to everyone who has been so supportive. Your advice has really helped me through the hardest part of this process.